Welcome to Benefits Redefined, a series of conversations focused on rewriting the employer playbook. If you're an employer today, you're being pulled in a dozen directions at once. Rising healthcare costs, increasingly complex care decisions, growing employee expectations, and constant innovation. Too often, those forces are treated separately. Costs live in one conversation, care in another, culture somewhere else entirely. This podcast exists because those things don't actually operate in silos. I'm Richard Silberstein, and I work with a group of colleagues across the country who spend our time helping employers move beyond transactional benefits and towards strategies that actually work in the real world. Each episode features practitioners who are in the work every day, not theorists, not sales pitches, but people helping employers navigate what's next in employee benefits, healthcare risk, and enterprise strategy. Today, we're going to discuss what employers are getting wrong and right about pharmacy and pharmacy spend. We have Jennifer Perlitch, who's a clinical pharmacist, and you're going to hear the word PBM, and many of you know what PBM is, but it's a pharmacy benefit manager. And for those of you who don't know what a pharmacy benefit manager is, we'll get into that. But when you think about that logo on your card, CVS, Optum, Express Scripts, those are the organizations that really run the pharmacy program for your health plan. So Jennifer, thanks for coming on today. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For those who don't know what a clinical pharmacist is, who are you and what do you do?
I am a clinical pharmacist by trade, go through lots of schooling and really look at drug therapy and how drug therapy really maximizes a patient's outcome for whatever condition they're treating.
Before we get into trends, what does a clinical pharmacist actually see that employers don't?
So the first thing that comes to my mind is we really see what's under the hood. So an employer is looking at their benefit on the surface and understanding there's a formulary, there's pricing, there are clinical programs, there are incentives to, steer drugs from one therapeutic category or another. But what we see is we see what's really driving all of that and whether or not the clinical appropriateness of drugs tied to the pricing really makes the most financial and clinical sense.
So one of the other questions I have is, what's the most common misconception that you hear from CFOs and HR leaders about their pharmacy spend? I mean, I feel like there's a lot of talk about, high-cost drugs, GLP-1s, but when you have some of these meetings that you're having with clients, what do you think they're either getting wrong or they're misperceptions?
I think they think there's nothing they can do about it and that it's something they have to accept.
Yeah. And why do you think they think that? Not that we're playing, therapist on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a very, very complicated landscape that's changing extremely rapidly. There's so much happening across so many different fronts of pharmacy. And, in all honesty and fairness, they're not experts. And so they're just trying to navigate in the best way that they can.
And for people listening in, especially those that are maybe CFOs or HR from a self-funded employer, many employers don't know that they can interact with a clinical pharmacist, and many benefit consultants don't have a clinical pharmacist. I mean, I always say, like, you and some of the other folks you work with are like the superheroes. So you want to talk about what you see out there that's maybe the norm, and when you get engaged with clients, why they're like, wow, where have you been all my life?
Yeah, I mean, I think typical employers are just, taking in data, they're seeing it on the surface, they're understanding this is my cost, this is my trend, this is who's using the benefit, but what can you do about it? What our team does is we can look very laser focused at a report, claims, prior authorization criteria, drug selection on a formulary, clinical programs, and really tease in and really deep dive into, are these things providing value? Are they saving cost? Are there alternatives that they should be thinking of? And how do we go about doing that together? Like, how do we help them along this journey and guide them, but really, like you said, be their advocate with the PBM?
Yeah. And for those listening in, Jennifer's part of a team that interacts with their clients, but also is looking at the data. I see too many employers, especially CFOs, where they're having that mid-year report, and it's like, here's what happened the last year. And then the CFO's like, well, I didn't know. What could I have done about it? And so you're really partnering. And sometimes you're finding mistakes and things that should have been fixed. And from that standpoint, which we'll get into as we unpack that. As you think about reviewing, let's say, 10 self-funded health plans, if you were to review 10 self-funded health plans tomorrow, what are some of the 2 or 3 red flags that you look for, or things that are sort of common that you see that if I'm a CFO, I was like, wow, I didn't know that?
I think rebate credits is a really important thing that nobody really has an understanding about.
So tell me what that means in plain English for those listening in.
Sure. So pharmacy benefit contracts are set up with incentivized rebates on certain brand name medications. And what's happening is the industry's shifting. And what was once an abundance of money sitting, in a pool of rebates, those rebates are shrinking now. And why are they shrinking? Well, biosimilars is a huge piece of the market that, was never a factor before. So the manufacturers are not releasing these large dollar rebates to the PBMs, who then in turn give them to their clients. Rebate credits are a way to claw back some of that money because they can't meet those guarantees in their contracts because you're not using their brand name high cost Humira prescription any longer. You're now using the biosimilar. And so manufacturers are pulling back that money because they're saying that there's been an industry change that has prevented them from being able to adhere to the terms of their contract. So the value of that is really misunderstood and underestimated in the market. And what's really frightening, if I could use such a word, is that as we move into 2026 and 2027, there are more drugs that are going to be eligible for this rebate credit. And employers are really going to start to see those shrinking dollars. I think the second thing is plan design. Employers don't understand that they can structure plan designs beyond, a $10 generic, $30 for brand, and $50 for specialty, and really help kind of steer member behavior to the drugs and the formulary and savings that they want to achieve. And then I think the third thing are GLP-1s. Regardless if you cover GLP-1s for weight loss, if you're not looking at what's happening on the diabetes side, there's a real opportunity there.
I know some people listening probably know what rebates are, but let's say somebody that was in a fully insured plan that's thinking about going self-funded, what's the 101, the Reader's Digest version as to how you would explain a rebate?
Yeah, so a contract is set up with what's called rebate guarantees. And so what a PBM is telling you is if you fill a drug or have a drug that a claim is generated for a drug, let's say it's a specialty drug, and the contract says we're going to pay you money back. So a rebate is giving money back to the employer to offset the cost of the drug. So let's say you have a drug that costs $10,000 a month, and your contract has a rebate guarantee provision of $5,000 a month. This is overinflated, so this is for easy math. So what it's saying is every time that $10,000 claim hits, you're going to get $5,000 back to help offset that cost.
And one thing that you and your team do also, you're going to help employers do audits to make sure did what their contract said actually pay them. And what's nice to know is I've seen you all come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That's right.
Where on a local hospital here, you found $100,000 that they were owed. And if nobody was looking at all that stuff, they would have not known that they overspent by $100,000. The hot topic right now that everybody wants to know about, I know we're going to have another session on this, is GLP-1s. And I just want to touch on maybe some high-level things as to what's going on in the marketplace. I feel like I read an alert that your team sent out that there's an oral coming, that costs are coming down, the oral's not as effective, adherence isn't as good. But what's the landscape in 2026 when we think about GLP-1s and what should an employer be doing or thinking about?
So a couple of things. So if you're an employer that's covering GLP-1s today and using your PBM, you're overpaying. You're using the supply chain. So the cost is much higher compared to these direct-to-consumer options that are out there in the market today. So 2025 and into 2026, we're going to see a lot of continued development in this direct-to-consumer market. And we're also going to see some evolving strategies specific to how PBMs can incorporate these lower prices into the benefits so that members are not just left on their own to try and find ways to fund this. Because if you're an employer that wants to cover them today and you are covering them today and you're paying over $1,000 and then getting a rebate, maybe $350 that offsets, you're definitely paying more than if you were to go direct to consumer. So that's one thing. The second thing is that the pipeline is plentiful. There are many, many agents in the pipeline looking at different mechanisms of action that will potentially be even more effective. But what we're seeing in the immediate future is the onset of an oral agent that is hopefully going to be cheaper to manufacture. But with that comes, the risks of lower adherence because you're going to need to take it every day versus use an injection once a week. So, there's a lot of uncertainty around what is going to happen there. In addition to that, we're seeing companies pop up as a third-party vendor solution that's going to help employers buy direct to consumer and finding ways for employers to partially fund their employees trying to get to these, improving access.
So when you, just for people listening in, the $1,000, is that a prescription, a month? What's the total for GLP-1s that an employer's, paying roughly, let's say at the PBM level?
On average, it's around $1,000 if you, just take an average of them. Some are as high as $1,300 and change. Some are at $1,100 and change. Some are $9 something.
What's the
so
annualized?
It really depends on your contract and your PBM. So understanding what your core costs are really, really important. And then taking into account, these are brand name drugs. So some type of rebate is attached to them. So understanding what's your net cost and how does that net cost figure in and compare to what a direct-to-consumer option offers.
And again, what's that in the annualized for that? Is that 12,000? I mean, are we talking about like roughly
around
monthly?
12,000.
Right,
yeah.
right. And then if somebody said they can't afford them now, I'm going to wait for the oral for the cost to go down. Are there employers able to do anything to help their employees in terms of? Are you seeing employers doing anything in terms of education or any type of arrangements that you feel that, because, when we're talking about cost, we're talking about for companies like millions of dollars that they just can't afford. And part of that's why medical trends going up.
Yeah, I think employers really underestimated the utilization of these agents because, you want to do the right thing, so you're going to offer the coverage, but you really don't expect the utilization and the number of individuals to engage in this therapy. So really kind of missing the mark at the financial impact. In a blink of an eye, you could be at $500,000 in spend, and that's unsustainable for the average employer.
Right.
What we're seeing in the short term is that employers are very hesitant to do anything beyond offering and reminding individuals that they can use HSA and or FSA funds to try and source these drugs. The challenge is there are many third-party vendors out there that are trying that are popping up as an intermediary where they're offering an option for employers to partially fund a member's access. There are some compliance and regulatory issues that have not really been flushed out yet. So our team is very hesitant to recommend them as a viable solution at this point.
Right. One last topic on the GLP-1s, then we'll move off of that. It's interesting. I know we've seen it where somebody says, I'm not covering GLP-1s for weight loss, right? Mm-hmm. And then next quarter now, all of a sudden, there's 200 diabetics that they didn't know were diabetics.
That's right.
Because they're going to the doctor, getting diagnosed as early stage diabetes, and they're, where they thought they were going to save money, they weren't. Is that something that you're still seeing or hearing about?
We are, and really it's PBM dependent. And this, you ask what does a clinical pharmacist see that an employer may not? This is where we really get into that prior authorization criteria and what is the criteria to allow someone access to this drug. What we find is that in too many cases, it's simply a provider saying a person has diabetes and not really providing clinical backup and documentation that proves it. And so, you're an employer that doesn't cover weight loss or did cover weight loss and no longer does. We start to see that curve on the other side. And it's a red flag.
our friend Chris likes to say it's like the alarm company monitoring it to prevent the break-in before it occurs.
That's right.
So you're looking at the data. Let's shift from GLP-1s because they're not the only thing driving drug cost. We're seeing a lot in the specialty drug area. Do you want to just give folks that might not be as knowledgeable, what are specialty drugs and why are they driving such big increases, especially as we think about oncology, autoimmune, gene cell therapies?
Yeah, so a specialty drug is a drug that is classified as requiring either specific handling or additional clinical oversight, perhaps refrigeration. So storage is another component. What's concerning is that a specialty drug is defined by a PBM, not by any body of clinical evidence. So not any type of like oversight committee like the FDA. The FDA doesn't determine if a drug is considered specialty or not. Each individual PBM has their specialty drug list and how they define that. What's challenging is that these drugs are more expensive because of the additional need for clinical oversight, for monitoring for safety, storage requirements, a wide array of additional provisions. What employers typically don't realize is that this market is evolving just as rapidly as the GLP-1 pipeline, in that not only are we having new drugs come to market, but we have existing specialty drugs that are receiving expanded indications. And what does that mean? So a drug that's considered specialty may have come to market to treat one specific condition. But what's happening is that we're finding these drugs are valuable in a vast number of conditions, which is expanding access. So before you thinking, okay, I may have 2 people that have this particular condition, now because of these expanded indications, 20 people might be, appropriate. And so we're seeing the cost skyrocket as a result of that as well.
And when we talk about specialty drugs, give folks listening like an example, like was it Zolgensma is like $2 million, but what's the range of that you're seeing low to high from that standpoint in some of these areas?
Yeah, so on the specialty drug side, people probably have seen commercials for Skyrizi or Tremfya. Those are 2 big ones that are out there. Cosentyx is another one. And those prices, are ranging from several $1,000s a month, on average, anywhere between, let's say, $5,000 to $20,000 plus per month, right?
Wow.
Depending upon, where they are in their treatment, what the cost is, but how frequently, what are the dosing intervals? How frequently do they need to have them in the course of a month? The drug that you mentioned is on the cell and gene therapy side. And so those are drugs that are typically handled on the medical benefit, which is a whole nother conversation that we could have at a future time. But that's another area of huge opportunity that employers are not realizing the potential financial impact, that those medical drugs. The drug that you spoke about is around $2 million. There are some that we've seen as high as $7 million right now.
Wow. So when you think about specialty drugs, and let's say you have an employer that maybe hasn't been as strategic, didn't know what a clinical pharmacist was, didn't know that you exist, what are just a few things that in 2026 an employer should be thinking about doing to manage specialty better, or any strategies or options or vendors?
I think that understanding the biosimilar strategy of the PBM that they're working with, and what I mean by that is, are they preferring a biosimilar where it's available compared to the reference product? So a reference product is the originator product. So let's use Humira. Humira is an originator product / reference product. That has a price tag of around $7,000 per month, let's say. There are biosimilars that are available and on the market. There are different costs associated. So some of them are a higher cost and some of them are a lower cost. So on the higher side, there's some type of a rebate associated with them, and they align closer to the cost of Humira. And then there are lower cost alternatives that are much, much higher in savings. So understanding, does my PBM promote and or mandate a biosimilar be used first? And if the answer is no, Why not? That's the first question. The other thing I think that they need to understand is watching movement within specialty drugs. So what we're seeing with expanded indications is that people are moving from one drug to another and really being able to monitor what's happening at a member level to understand what that trend is going to look like over time. And I think that they would find that there will be cases where the cost will be much higher than they anticipated based on the availability of an expanded indication in a different drug that or drug class that may be more costly than what they're using today.
Right. You were on that call yesterday where one of our peers said, if you're not having a third-party independent review, right? Because a lot of times the TPA or the carrier are the ones doing the review. So it's the fox watching the hen house.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, another question I have is if a CFO only asked one better question during a PBM review, what should it be? Any thoughts on that one?
Oh, wow. That's a hard one. One question. I mean, there's so many questions.
Well, give me a few that come to mind. Give me a few that come to mind, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Well, I mean, I think more than anything, they really have to understand what's behind those rebate numbers and the guarantees and what really excuses a PBM for delivering on those guarantees. I think that that's a huge miss a lot of the times, and understanding the delay in the payments and then what the PBM has power to claw back. I don't think that there's a true understanding.
Right. And I think you and your team are looking at it, it's almost like you're representing the employer to the PBM versus too often there's other constituencies representing the employer and the TPA and not really digging into that next level. Okay, another question I have is if you were advising a CFO and CHRO starting 2026 planning today, what are the top 3 pharmacy actions you'd recommend? And I think we talked about this yesterday on one of our AHS calls, but if somebody's thinking about 2026, they're probably really thinking about 2027, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, so they really should be starting early 2026 for 2027.
Yeah, we're currently talking to all of our clients that we want to have some type of pharmacy solution in place for 1/1/27. Those conversations and actions begin in January. We have to make sure that we have a long runway to make sure that we are getting the best pricing available. We understand the financials, we understand the member impact, and can implement a solution and or a change if that's what the end result is in enough time to really ensure that the HR teams and the members themselves have everything they need to have a smooth transition.
So let's say somebody says, well, 2027 is a long way away, and I agree that we need to start in the next quarter. Are there some things that you are seeing as you're meeting with employers that they could be doing in the short term? I know we had a nonprofit captive that we worked on where they figured out who was taking certain GLP-1s and what protocols to put in place, and maybe they adjust for new employees, not for existing employees. So are people kind of stuck for the year, or what are some things that you're seeing employers do sort of mid-year?
No, you're definitely not stuck for the year. PBMs need a runway, okay, to make changes. That's perfectly reasonable. An employer can make a change. You want to talk about GLP-1 coverage, right? Or putting in a companion program to help support them with nutrition and behavior change. Employers can do that. The challenge is the runway that the PBM needs, and then whether or not there's going to be a financial impact to the employer for putting in these stricter guardrails or changing the rules of engagement, so to speak.
One of my last questions, what's one question you wish every employer would ask their PBM in 2026? Like, as you think about that post-renewal meeting, is there a question that you think that really with where things are, that they need to ask that and they need to make sure that the PBM answers it, right? Doesn't dance around it.
Yeah, I think the rebates and rebate credits is a big topic for 2026. And that also, tying into what's on their roadmap as far as innovative solutions and cost containment strategies. And I'm not sure that every PBM has an answer for that, but I do think some of the smaller, transparent PBMs, and what I mean by transparent is improved visibility to the pricing structure and what all of that means. I think there's a lot more innovation happening as opposed to the big three that are really just trying to make changes to help preserve some of their revenue.
Right. And maybe because of something you just said, every employer should ask their consultant that they want to review a transparent PBM
Absolutely.
and a non-transparent PBM. Because on a call this morning, we had, that's where there was for a 3,000 person group, it was $1.5 million savings, right?
That's right.
And again, with healthcare trend going up 8 to 10%, even higher, I feel like pharmacy is something that people, like you said in the beginning, people feel not stuck, but it is what it is. What can I do? And
Right.
as we have more of these discussions, I think they'll realize that they need people like you and your team and others to look under the hood for them and figure it out for them.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I just want to say thank you for joining me on this podcast, that we hope to have you back many more times as we have these discussions, and some of your peers and friends as we maybe have multiple of us together, because I think what we want to do is help people understand there are options. And again, for those listening in, Jennifer's part of a group that we call the AHS, the Advanced Health Strategy Group, but it started where we said we want to help employees have greater access to care, lower employee cost, lower employer cost, and then also improve health outcomes. And so we're blessed to have someone like Jennifer on our team. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.